Hello everyone, I'm that one Spartan 3, and it's Halo's 20-year anniversary! Yes, it's become that time where Bungie's first Halo game becomes a fine wine for everyone to enjoy. And to celebrate this triumph of Halo's legacy, I'm going to do a review series. And where better to start than Halo Combat Evolved. And I'll continue until Halo Infinite, or whatever Halo game comes after Infinite. But I won't be doing Spartan Assault or Spartan Strike, because who the fuck cares about those games? But without further ado, let's begin the review! Oh, and a spoiler warning for those who haven't played the game before, or are getting into it for the first time, you have been warned. The story of Halo Combat Evolved starts with an opening shot of a UNSC ship, the Pillar of Autumn, flying towards a mysterious Halo ring as the ship had escaped from a battle against the game's main antagonist, the Covenant, a group of various alien races that worship the Forerunners and believe the Halo rings are a path to their great journey. You'll learn more about that in the next game. After being introduced to the Pillar of Autumn's captain, Jacob Keyes and AI Cortana, the ship goes on to full alert and prepares for evacuation procedures while being attacked by Covenant forces that followed them to the Halo ring. Then we are introduced to the game's protagonist the player will be controlling, the Master Chief, John 117. The first mission is meant to be a tutorial mission, so that you understand how the game functions and plays, as shown by the fact that once you get out of the cryopod, the room you're in lets you get a feel of the movement, how you look around, and the most important game feature throughout the entire series, the shields. The shield is the main mechanic that is basically extra health that allows you to tank out some enemies. However, that cannot be said for every encounter because not everything can be handled by charging into the enemy all the time.
I mean, do you see that man over there charging me? While I'm in a tank!
It's always a good idea to use your surroundings and weapons to your advantage, and save you some shield energy to use later on. Plus, the shields can regenerate after a short period of time. After an introduction to the basics of movement and shields, you're then immediately sent to the bridge by Captain Keyes, and while you're making your way to the bridge, you're being fired at by Covenant forces that have boarded the ship, and you do not have a weapon to defend yourself with. But eventually, you make your way to the bridge, and are informed by Captain Keyes that you need to evacuate the ship and take Cortana with you to avoid having information captured and used against humanity. Once you leave the bridge, you are then introduced to the gunplay, by being handed the Magnum pistol first, which is one of the most powerful weapons in the game, as it can one-shot a hunter from behind. Shortly after, you're then introduced to the main weapon of the game, the assault rifle, a low-damage rifle with rapid fire and 60 bullets in the mag to shoot at your enemies. And with these weapons in your hands, you're now able to shoot your way off the Pillar of Autumn. You'll eventually find grenades and power-ups along the way that also change combat in their own way. Once you make it to an escape pod, you see the Autumn fly past towards the Halo ring, the same destination that the escape pod is heading to. Eventually, the escape pod crash lands onto the ring world, and everyone in the pod dies on impact. Everyone but Chief, of course. After realizing that everyone around you is dead, and that you need to leave the crash site before the Covenant can spot you, this is now the part where the game starts to introduce you to a new environment, one that is more open to exploration than the enclosed halls back in the last mission. After traversing through the cliffside on the ring world, you eventually find survivors and aid them in fighting off a few waves of Covenant forces. Once the enemy forces are cleared out, the survivors all board a Pelican, and the Pelican drops off a Warhog, the first vehicle you are introduced to. It's a military jeep with a mounted machine gun turret on the back, and is perfect for all-terrain purposes. You can even get into any space possible. Literally, any space possible. You just gotta put your mind to it. But once you're in the Warhog, you're on your way to finding other survivors that landed nearby, but as you're driving, you notice a tunnel that was man-made, but its design is unfamiliar to you, as this is the first time you've seen something like this structure, as well as the structure you just passed by, and the bridge. But you proceed to go through to reach the other side of the cave structure while fighting Covenant along the way, as well as fighting more Covenant forces as you find the survivors. Once you find the last group of survivors, you learn that Captain Keyes has survived the crash and has been taken prisoner aboard the Covenant ship, the Truth and Reconciliation. After learning of Captain Keyes' whereabouts, Chief and a squad of Marines begin an infiltration mission to rescue Captain Keyes from the Covenant ship, the Truth and Reconciliation. I could say stealth works in this game, however, stealth is one of those things that can be effective. However, one thing to keep note of is that once one enemy has noticed you, everyone else around the area springs into action. I'm not saying stealth is impossible, there are times where stealth can be effective, however most of the time you won't bother with stealth much because you'll most likely shoot the enemy with whatever weapon you have on you. But don't let me discourage you from trying a stealth approach. Give it a go and see how effective you can be. But once you've made your way past the ground forces that are guarding the entrance to the ship, you enter said ship and traverse your way through the many corridors within to reach the detention level, and free Keyes from his cell as well as other imprisoned Marines. Once Keyes is free, he begins to explain how he overheard the guards saying that the Halo Ring is a weapon and that they could use it to destroy humanity. After learning of this information, you immediately leave the Truth and Reconciliation by taking one of their dropships for a quick escape. Chief regroups with the rest of the UNSC forces and begins a full-force assault on an island known as the Silent Cartographer, where you hope to find the location of the Ring's control room with the information stored in this facility. The mission's map is literally one round island, and you can go in any direction you want after this first combat encounter, which gives players a choice. Even though it is just a direction choice, and that it might not matter regardless of which way you choose, it all ends the mission the same way. I still thought it'd be nice to include this feature since most of the missions in the game you're always following a path that leads to your destination. But not this mission though, it does something a bit unique for a change. Upon reaching the structure where the map room is located, the path forward is blocked off, so your next course of action is to open the door by going to another part of the island to open the door and then make your way back to continue your progress. But once you find the information you need to find the control room, you immediately jump on a pelican and proceed to fly through an access hole within the center of the island that descends into the Ring's inner tunnels to reach the control room. After traversing through the inner tunnels of the Ring, Chief is eventually dropped off as close as possible to the control room. He finds himself at the edge of the pit where the pelican came from, with only one door to go through. He goes through the door and traverses through the many corridors, rooms, and bridges to reach the control room. This mission is a mix between indoor combat and outdoor combat, where half the time you'll be wandering through the corridors and rooms that connect to each other, and fight whatever enemies that are in those rooms. And then it can transition to the cold, snowy canyon, which is a much more open environment, where you can drive around in vehicles to get around the place much easier. Plus, this is the mission where you'll say hello to a new vehicle, the Scorpion tank. Perfect for what lies ahead, for you will be fighting against some of the Covenant's vehicles, which are the Ghost, Wraith, and Banshee. But the fun does eventually stop when there comes to a point where you have to leave the tank behind and continue on foot. But once the fun with the tank has ended and have cleared the rest of the enemies, Chief is immediately back into more corridors and rooms to traverse, until he eventually reaches the main building that houses the control room. And once you make it to the control room, you hook Cortana into the main terminal and have her find out more about the Ring. But after digging up some information, Cortana immediately tells Chief to go find Keyes, for she fears that his life is in great danger. The Pelican ship drops the Master Chief off at Keyes' last known location within a swamp. He sees a crashed Pelican just next to where he was dropped off, as well as a crashed Covenant dropship a bit further up the path. After traversing through the swamp, he eventually hears gunfire in the distance and investigates it. It came from a building with a few grunts at the front of the doorway, panicking. But after dealing with the grunts, Chief ventures in to find Keyes. The inside is littered with Covenant barriers and crates, with areas that looked damaged. He even comes across a Marine with a pistol in his hand, and is afraid. The Marine immediately opens fire on Chief, believing that he is something else. But what exactly he's seen, you do not know just yet. After putting the Marine out of his misery and some exploration of the facility, Chief comes across a door, opening it to see a dead Marine begin to fall. But as he grabs the body, he hears a strange noise and proceeds to go through the door and close it behind him, where he sees more dead Marines on the floor. To find out what happened, Chief grabbed the closest helmet on the floor to access the recordings. Upon viewing the recordings, he sees Keyes' men enter the building and discover that the Covenant had also been under attack by what lies within this building. And then when the recording comes close to an end, it shows him some creatures that swarm Keyes' men, and the recording ends. And once Chief finishes watching the recordings, he is finally introduced to the game's new threat, known as the Flood. An alien hive species whose sole purpose is to affect everything in sight. Chief is met with waves of small spore forms, assisted with infected elite and human forms. Chief's main objective now was to escape the building from this new threat that has emerged. Along the way, he finds some surviving Marines, and they all together rally with Chief to fight the enemy and escape. However, during the fighting, one by one, the Marines start to die, with the Master Chief as the last man standing, until he is teleported to higher ground to meet with 343 Guilty Spark, the monitor of Installation 04. 343 dispatches Sentinel drones to combat the Flood and requests Chief to help out with activating the ring's defenses, and then is immediately teleported away. This mission created a very tense atmosphere, with an ominous, dark and eerie setting, backed up with the music to give the environment a more ominous feeling. And when the Flood showed up for the first time, it gave the player a new encounter to fight that they haven't seen before. But they will be seeing the Flood for the rest of the game. Mark my words. After being teleported from the swamps by 343, you are teleported to the mission, which feels like a Dark Souls boss when played on Legendary, aka the Library. This is where Chief goes to find the activation index that will activate the ring's defenses, but before Chief can acquire the index, he needs to fight his way through the many waves of Flood, through large corridors, small tunnels and elevators to reach the index. This mission shows you the full strength of the Flood, as the previous mission was a taste of what's to come. And now you're in full swing, fighting wave after wave of Flood of all forms, such as the Spore, the infected elites and humans, and the Spore Carrier. And not to mention, they can be carrying various weapons from both the UNSC and the Covenant. There's even times where you feel trapped, as there are parts of the mission where you have to wait for 343 to open the door, and as you're waiting for the doors to open, hordes of Flood will jump out of the ventilation shafts on the walls to ambush you. However, I learned that if you sit in a corner, as indicated on the screen, the Flood won't notice you there, and you can wait there until the doors open. I know that's cheesing it, but I wouldn't blame you if you were playing on Legendary. I really wouldn't. But this mission surely does make you feel like you have no other options in front of you other than to face the hordes head on. But once Chief makes it to the index, his time in hell finally comes to an end and is immediately teleported back to the control room. Once in the control room, Chief and 343 Guilty Spark make their way to the terminal and insert the index. But Cortana stops the ring's activation and takes the index, and explains that the Halo ring is a weapon that kills all life in the galaxy in order to starve the Flood. To which 343 confirms this information and demands that the rings be activated, or else Chief and Cortana will be killed by Sentinels. But Chief refuses 343's offer and fights the Sentinels. Once the Sentinels were dealt with, you leave the control room with Covenant forces still occupying the area, and begin your journey to disable 3 pulse generators to prevent any other way to activate the Halo ring. For the rest of the game, You're pretty much backtracking through the previous missions with a few twists. This is clearly reusing assets, but the story narrative makes pretty much sense. There's nothing wrong with pretty much using the same assets and locations, of course. So long as, of course, you do it right. And properly. But once Chief and Cortana find all the pulse generators, Cortana finds out that the Pillar of Autumn's reactors are still intact. But you need to find Captain Keyes first. Luckily, Cortana discovered how to use the ring's teleportation system while in the ring's control terminal, and uses it to reach Captain Keyes. Chief and Cortana teleport back to the Truth and Reconciliation, as this is where Keyes was detected. Once inside the ship, Chief hears Keyes' voice over the intercoms, telling Chief to leave it behind, but for what reason is unknown to him as of yet. But Chief presses on through the ship, only to find that the only way forward is through a hole in the floor that leads outside. After landing in a pool of ship fuel, I think, Chief traverses the small canyon paths fighting Covenant and Flood, and seeing how the Covenant are struggling to fight off the Flood themselves. But that's not going to stop them from killing you, or you killing them. But after some traversing and combat, Chief reaches the gravity lift that gets him back onto the ship. Once he's back on the ship, Chief sees the ship has been greatly damaged, and corpses are littered across the ship, with Flood coming out of the damaged areas, swarming him in the narrow corridors. You hear Keyes' voice once again, indicating you are close, and fear that he is delusional. So Chief rushes to his location, only to realize that Captain Keyes has been taken by the Flood, and has morphed him into a proto-gravemind. The only thing that Chief can do now is take his neuroimplants by punching a hole into his head. Once the neuroimplants were in his possession, Chief immediately leaves the ship, but not before waves of Flood and Covenant attack him once again. But once Chief makes it to the hangar, he sees a dropship and 2 Banshees fly in and land, and immediately heads down to the Banshees, takes one of them, and flies off towards the Pillar of Autumn. Upon arriving at the Pillar of Autumn, Chief crashes the Banshee before jumping out into a used escape pod shaft, and proceeds through the corridors that you first walked in at the very beginning of the game. As Chief makes his way through, he sees Sentinels are combating both Covenant and Flood, but Chief takes care of them with no problems at all. Upon entering the bridge, Cortana begins the reactor meltdown and a countdown to indicate the exact time the ship will self-destruct. But 343 Guilty Spark is on board the ship and has stopped the countdown and disabled the reactor to prevent it from exploding. However, Chief comes up with a plan to destroy the reactor manually by placing a grenade in the weak points of the reactor. But before he leaves, Sentinels appear outside and attack him to stop his progress. But fail anyway, because it's useful to have a plasma weapon on you when fighting Sentinels. Fun tip, keep that in mind. But Chief makes his way over to the reactor after fighting more Covenant, Flood, and Sentinels that block his path, and places a grenade, or rocket, in 4 different vents that connect to the fusion reactor. Once the reactor has been damaged enough for it to explode, Chief makes his way to a service elevator that leads into a bay full of warthogs, and begins one of the greatest experiences in Halo history, the Warthog Run. The Warthog Run is the final part of the mission that has you drive a Warthog through a pathway within the Pillar of Autumn that has various obstacles in the way, such as enemies and various ramps that you can take to pass by pretty much everything. But while he's driving off the ship to rendezvous with a Pelican dropship to pick him up, there's also a timer to pretty much indicate how long you have before the ship explodes. And you don't want to be around for that. As Chief drives along, he reaches an opening where the Pelican is meant to pick him up from. But instead, the Pelican is pursued by 2 Banshees, and crash lands, leaving Chief with only one option left. His only choice left is a longsword in a hangar. Once again, Chief drives along with the only given path, with the timer still ticking down until he reaches the hangar, gets out of the Warthog, and travels to the longsword by foot. Once on board, Chief flies away from the Pillar of Autumn as it begins to explode. You see flood forms outside the ship, as well as the destruction of the ship. You can even see Sergeant Johnson fighting an elite before the ship explodes, and then they just all of a sudden hug as they know they're about to die. However, you will only see that cutscene if you're playing through it on Legendary difficulty. With the longsword now in orbit, the Pillar of Autumn causes a big enough explosion to shatter the ring. Chief looks outside the ship's window to see the ring's debris collide with the other side of the ring, destroying it completely. Chief and Cortana are the only 2 who survived and have destroyed the Halo Ring, a Covenant Armada, and the Flood. And the campaign ends with the Master Chief and Cortana flying away in space.
Halo, it's finished.
No, I think we're just getting started.
Whew! That was a lot of words I just spouted out of my mouth. But I feel now that I should talk about the other things about the game and what I think to them, starting with what I thought of the campaign story. I enjoyed it a lot. It has a great story with a flowing narrative. Every little piece of the story pretty much made, of course, complete sense. Nothing pretty much felt out of place. It was all there, all the story elements were there, and of course, to back up the story, we had great characters. And all the characters, of course, were good characters, like the Master Chief, being the strong, not much to say, super soldier, Cortana being the smart AI, and Johnson being Johnson, because Johnson is perfect, and if anyone says otherwise, then I will send a pipe bomb in your mailbox. But it's a story that is engaging to me, and hopefully to you guys as well. But enough of the campaign, especially after going through every mission. Literally speaking about it. And let us move on to the gameplay. The gameplay itself is basic stuff. It's just a matter of how you use these basic gameplay mechanics against your foes in combat. But the game introduces you to new ways to how to play the game using the various weapons and vehicles within each level, and it all makes the game feel unique in its own way. It's one of the reasons why Halo was a major success at the time, and is still remembered up to this day. Now it's time to move on to our next topic about the game, and that is the soundtrack, and my fucking god, it can make a man coom. Oh shit. The man behind the soundtrack for Halo, and also helped with making Halo in more ways than just the soundtrack, was Martin O'Donnell. His work on Halo's soundtrack is beautiful, to say the least. The music that man has made is worshipping material. Another good thing about the soundtrack is that each piece of music is well done and fits well with every moment within the game. However, there are times where you hear the same soundtrack in different areas of the game as well. But hey, if it means listening to the main Halo theme or the Covenant dance again, then I don't care. To Martin O'Donnell and to the people who helped create such an amazing soundtrack, I tip my helmet to you guys, as I cannot stop praising the soundtrack. The game also featured multiplayer as well, however back in 2001, multiplayer was a lot different compared to now. For at the time, the Xbox was a brand new device, and Xbox Live wasn't introduced yet. But because of that, the multiplayer side had to be done either co-op with one console, or LAN parties. But co-op can be fun as well, as you can either play the campaign with a friend, or fight to death in a 1v1 battle in the various multiplayer maps, like Hang 'em High, Longest, Battle Creek, Damnation, and the most iconic map of all, Blood Gulch. That map made so many memories, and made a certain company famous. Or you can gather with your friends for a LAN party, if you even have any friends that is, and play bigger games like Slayer, Capture the Flag, King of the Hill, Oddball, and Race. Those days must have been both a hectic and a fun time. But these days, however, we have Halo the Master Chief Collection that has multiplayer matchmaking that we're all used to, and more with mods, for both Halo MCC and the original Halo Combat Evolved PC port. But multiplayer overall is pretty good. All you need to do is not let yourself get killed by the guy who wanted the sniper rifle you just picked up. Also, the pistol can kill a Spartan with 3 bullets to the head, so I would recommend using it at all times. And that's Halo Combat Evolved, a game that created a legacy for itself and became popular enough to continue the stories the Halo universe has to offer, whether those stories lie within the games, books, and shows that have come after it. And I'll be sure to cover the games. And no, I can't be asked to do all the books and shows. Fuck off. The Halo franchise has been something that I've enjoyed and loved for a very long time now. I may not have started at the very beginning of Halo, but I managed to catch up with the games and experience the things that everyone else in the Halo community has experienced. And for those who haven't played Halo before, do give it a go. It's worth the fun. Well, I believe that's pretty much everything I have to say now. So, all I want to say now is thank you all for watching. If you ended up liking the video, do like the video. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Comment down below what you guys think. And share the video out. In celebration of Halo, and to, of course, help the channel grow. Once again, thank you all for watching. And I'll see you next time.